Hi everyone, my name is Matt Williams. I'm the Access Fellow at Jesus College at the University of Oxford, and I would like to talk to you today about the slightly tricky subject of rejection. Rejection by a university like Oxford when you apply. The reason for talking about this now is because it's January, so Happy New Year everyone, and this is the time of year when we send out our letters and emails to those that have applied, and more than 80% of those that have applied will receive the news that they have been unsuccessful in their application and that they have been rejected. And I want to talk to you about this because I'm an academic, so I'm involved in admissions, and I have had the difficult and unpleasant job of sending out those sorts of letters for people that have applied to degrees in politics. So specifically the undergraduate degrees in PPE, philosophy, politics and economics, and history and politics. I also have personal experience of having applied myself to these universities and having been rejected twice by both Cambridge and Oxford. So I applied as a 17-year-old to Cambridge and I was rejected then. And then I applied after doing my undergraduate degree at Bristol to Oxford and was rejected by Oxford. And then at the third time of applying to Oxford again, I was then successful, and I've been at Oxford ever since then. So it's taken me 3 times. Now, one thing to note is that was a surprisingly difficult thing to admit. I find it quite embarrassing to say, yeah, I had to try 3 times to get into Oxford. But I want to really unpack that emotion. I want to understand why should that be embarrassing. I actually, when I rationalise it, don't think that should be a source of embarrassment. And I want to share with you some tools, some psychological tools to use to think differently about rejection, which is a material process. You are rejected, and that's something that you can easily move on from, versus the psychological state of feeling like a reject, which is much more difficult to overcome, but is an important part of growing as an individual. So that's what I want to talk about. I also want to give you the academics perspective because there's been some fantastic videos made, in particular the one by Jack Edwards, on what it's like as an undergraduate, a prospective undergraduate applying and being rejected. And I want you to see the perspective from the academics, those of us that have to actually administer the admissions process. Okay, so just a little bit on the actual practicalities of rejection. As I say, over 80% of applicants are sadly rejected. We spend about 20 person hours roughly per application, so we spend a long time on everyone's application to make sure that we're making the right decisions. So the process is, as far as possible, fair. It's not, as some people suggest, a lottery in the sense that we kind of just throw all the applications in the air and whichever land in a particular area we take and those that don't, we don't take. We do take extraordinary care, but there is still, of course, a large degree of luck involved insofar as the type of questions that may have arisen or the circumstances under which you took your parts of the application might have affected your performance, better or worse, and it can come down to such minor differences that might have meant the difference between being accepted or being rejected. Okay, and from personal experience, I can tell you that we could easily have taken double, triple, quadruple the number of students and they would have succeeded on the course. We're simply not allowed to take more students because Oxford City Council won't allow us to put any more pressure on public services. So that's why the university doesn't expand to take on more students. It's not because we don't want you, it's because we can't have you, okay? And it's certainly not the case that people that we reject would not have been successful. Okay, so I want to get back to the main theme of this video, which is the distinction between the material and the psychological components of rejection. Okay, now the material part, simply stated, is that it does not matter if you are rejected by universities like Oxford. It doesn't materially change who you are. Okay, the key thing that does tend to affect people is the psychological reaction to rejection, which I'll deal with a little bit later. So let's start with the material side. What happens when you're rejected? Well, nothing changes. It's not like you suddenly lose skills or capabilities. It's not like you suddenly are divested of your intelligence. The people that apply and that are not accepted by Oxford University are amongst the brightest people in the world. They could have made it. It's simply that we didn't have space for them. So it's really important to remember, a lot of people sort of feel, upon being rejected by Oxford, that they are somehow less capable, they're not the best they could have been, and that's not the case, okay? And indeed, it may have been that an individual was rejected simply because Oxford wasn't the best fit for them. The way we teach at Oxford is quite particular. It has its advantages, but it also has its disadvantages. The tutorial system we use in Oxford is fantastic insofar as we teach in very, very small classes, but that can limit someone's self-reliance. So at other universities I've taught at and other universities I've studied at, there's much more of a need to push yourself because you're getting much less proximate attention to tutors. But that can be a really good thing. That can be really empowering. So you need to be very careful to think that this notion that Oxford is the best university has to be contextualised, because there's a lot of subjectivity to it. It depends on what's best for you. It depends on what's going to get the best out of you. Yes, it has a lot of fantastic features that many people would consider to be great, if not possibly the greatest. But be very careful. It may not, in fact, have been the best for you. It's a bit like when you're trying to find a partner. You know, you might really fancy someone. You think, oh, they're the one. I'm going to have children with them, and I'm going to live until I'm old with them. And then they turn you down when you ask them out. And you think, oh, God, I missed out on, living with the one who was going to change my whole life. But it could be that, given that they didn't necessarily see it the same way, they might not have been perfect for you. So you've got to think carefully, and it doesn't materially change who you are. It doesn't change your intelligence, it doesn't change your capabilities. The second component by which it doesn't materially matter if you're rejected by Oxford is that you can try again. And I'm living proof of that. Now, it may seem, honestly, I feel really sort of quite embarrassed about admitting how many times it took me to try, because it seems almost grasping and desperate. But the university doesn't see it that way, and I changed my application each time. I made various sort of mistakes at each time of trying, and that's why I didn't get in. So on reflection, it was kind of obvious, but I'll explain to you why I kept on trying in a minute. But nonetheless, you can try again. You can try for postgraduate degrees, you can try for different subjects, you can try again if you want to. If you don't want to, that's fine as well. So it doesn't materially affect you as an individual, because getting a rejection from Oxford is not the end of your potential relationship with the university at all. Okay, and finally, and very importantly, it doesn't change anything materially, because your success as an individual is not dependent on being admitted to Oxford. A lot of people assume that if you get into the world's best universities, that is the only way that you can possibly obtain the highest heights of success. But that is obviously nonsense, because people have succeeded extraordinary things from a range of different universities and backgrounds. So the notion that you have to get into an Ivy League school or Oxbridge or you name it, some other sort of powerful, important institution in order to yourself become powerful and important is empirically nonsense. There is so much evidence that that's not the case, okay? So your success is simply not dependent on it. And thankfully these days, the higher education sectors in the UK and in the US are much more diversified, meaning that it's not the case that there is this sort of unipolar world where you have Oxbridge and everything else is a bit sort of second rate. No way! Oxbridge is facing increasing pressure from fantastic universities that are making it clear that we are not, by any stretch of the imagination, the only players in town. So you mustn't think that your success is somehow completely rooted to whether or not you're admitted to Oxford. So, quick summary, it doesn't materially matter if you're rejected by Oxford, because it doesn't change anything about you, doesn't change your capabilities, doesn't change your skills, doesn't mean you're not the best you can possibly be. You can always try again if you want to, and if you don't want to, that's fine. And your success isn't dependent on it. So in material terms, being rejected doesn't matter. In psychological terms, this is where things become a bit more interesting. There's a difference between being rejected and feeling like a reject. The psychological construct of emotion around rejection is really fascinating. But the crucial point here is that the psychological reaction to being rejected is, to a significant extent, a choice. It's constructed intrinsically. In other words, you determine how you react to the stimuli. Now, of course, it's difficult to generalize. Some people will react completely phlegmatically. They'll sort of think, got rejected. It was a bit of a long shot, I know the odds were not necessarily in my favour, didn't get in, doesn't matter. And then at the other end of the extreme, some people might be indignant. They might sort of think, how could they have possibly rejected me? I'm perfect. And others might sort of think, they might be angry, they might be very upset, they might be devastated. Now, why is that? Let's dig into that a little bit. Well, there's something about the brand Oxbridge, because it's so famous, it's so old, quite prestigious, people use it as a degree of sort of psychic armour. They put it on themselves, metaphorically speaking, and it makes them feel like they belong to something greater than themselves. Now, that is precisely why I applied personally. I didn't have enough self-esteem. To put it in blunt terms, I applied to Oxford because I hated myself. I had such low self-esteem that I thought I had to put on this sort of armour of this enormously powerful brand in order to say to people, back off, look, I'm important, I mean something. Now, it actually took me coming to Oxford to realise that there was much more to the university than that. It's not a stick to beat other people away with. It's actually a place that teaches you the beauty of the universe. I'm sure that in part grew out of my own maturity and various other sort of things that I sought, such as counselling, to try and deal with that sense of low self-esteem. But the key point is that I'm convinced that a lot of people apply to Oxford or Cambridge or other sort of similarly famous and prestigious brand name universities because they feel a bit of a hole in themselves. They feel like they need to prove themselves to someone or something. And that can be difficult if someone is putting pressure on you. If they're saying, I will only validate you if you get into Oxbridge, that's a very difficult situation that thankfully I wasn't subject to, and I know a lot of young people are. But a lot of the time I see it coming from within the applicant themselves. They themselves are pouring enormous pressure on themselves. They're saying that I will only be a valid, valuable participant in the human race if I'm admitted to Oxford or Cambridge or similar universities. But I refer you back to the material points I was making earlier. It doesn't change you. You're still going to be amazingly intelligent. You're still going to be, the holder of all the other skills, talents, and wonderful parts of your personality that you had beforehand. The act of rejection didn't materially change you. It only psychologically changed you if you allowed it to. Because it's very important to note that someone can only bring you down with your permission. It's a famous quote from Eleanor Roosevelt, and it's absolutely right. You determine how you react to stimuli. So if you feel like a reject, you feel angry, you feel upset, you feel like your value has gone down because you weren't admitted by that university, that's to a significant extent a choice you're making as to how to react to that stimuli. And there are other choices you can make. You can think, well, I put everything into this application. I've grown as a person as a result. I've developed my thinking skills. I'll put them to work at another university or another opportunity. I'll do the best I can and I'll prove them wrong. And then maybe I'll try again and apply in a few years' time if they're lucky. They can have me if they're lucky, right? That's a much more sort of constructive way of looking at it rather than destructively saying, I got rejected because I'm unworthy, because I'm valueless, because I'm this, I'm that, I'm the other. The University of Oxford doesn't think that about you. You're putting that on yourself. And your value will be determined in large part by how you grow from these things that happen in life. And an individual's success will often be littered with periods of rejection. I can't think of anyone who has made a success of themselves, and you can define success however you like, but whether you think sort of earning lots of money or creating a great deal of power or influence or whatever, rejection is just part of that narrative. It's an inevitable part. It's not even a sad part. It's just necessary. And so that's why I'm not using the word failure, because it's only a failure if you let it become a failure, if you let it define you. If you talk about yourself as an Oxbridge reject and you make it into the sort of terms as if you've got, the mark of Cain and that you're going to carry it around with you for the rest of your existence. That psychological reaction is a choice, because remember, materially, you haven't changed. You're still a wonderful person. You're still highly intelligent. Nothing about you has materially changed from being rejected by Oxford. The only thing that may have changed is your psychological reaction to those stimuli. And that you perhaps need to interrogate and think about carefully, because that could be causing you real harm and could be inhibiting your ability to grow from the experience of applying to Oxford. I hope that makes sense. Do please get in touch if you like any further thoughts on this. I know it can be very difficult. Personally, I know it can be very difficult to be rejected by universities like Oxford, but I hope that this gives you some sense of how you can maybe move on from it, grow from it, and make the most of it. One of the things that really upsets me is that I know a lot of people don't even apply to Oxford because they fear rejection. But that's not a healthy way of living your life. If you don't try something simply because of the possibility it won't work out, then you may as well not even leave the house and not even try crossing the road. So you've got to at some point take a bit of a risk, take a bit of a grasp, go for something, aspire to something, and if it doesn't work out, it doesn't matter. doesn't make you a bad person. It doesn't mean that you're not the best version of you can possibly be. It doesn't mean you're valueless. And you mustn't allow your mind to create that false reality for yourself. Anyway, I hope this has been helpful. Do get in touch if you need anything. I've been Matt Williams. It's great to talk to you as ever. Happy New Year to you all. All the best. Bye.